Lily was just a maid. A girl forgotten by the world, trapped in a cycle of poverty. But deep inside, she carried a secret plan, one that would change everything. Richard. The man who had it all. Or so it seemed. Women, wealth, power, he treated them all like they would never run out. And yet, in this grand estate, one person knew the truth about him, and it wasn't Lily. Mr. James. The one man in this mansion who knew that everything Richard had was built on a lie. Sarah. A friend, a warning voice in a place where greed and deception ran deep. But would Lily listen? Or had she already made up her mind? She wasn't going to scrub floors forever. She was going to make him notice her. And when he did, she would never be poor again. Lily had spent years believing that fate had already chosen her place in life. But that night, as she watched Richard from the shadows of the grand estate, something shifted within her. This was no longer just a house where she scrubbed floors. It was an opportunity. A door waiting to be opened. And she would not let it remain closed. She knew what she had to do. No woman had ever entered Richard's life and left without riches. She had seen them come and go, living with gifts, jewels, and a future far brighter than the one she was born into. If she could bear his child, if she could tie her bloodline to his wealth, she would never have to beg again. Poverty would not be her story. It would not be her child's destiny. But Richard was not a man to chase a woman like her. No, she would have to make him believe it was his idea. Lily changed. The plain, invisible girl in the background became someone else. She dressed with more care, wrapping herself in fabrics that flattered her, choosing colors that made her skin glow. She found reasons to be in Richard's presence, always at the right moment, never too obvious. A gentle touch on his arm when passing by. A lingering glance when he laughed. A softness in her voice that hadn't been there before. And Richard, the man who never noticed anything outside of his own desires, began to take notice. At first, it was a passing glance. A curious flicker in his eyes. But curiosity had always been Richard's weakness. One evening, surrounded by yet another woman draped in silk and gold, his gaze shifted. Across the room, Lily stood, watching. Not with longing, not with desperation, but with something different. A quiet knowing. A challenge. It was a look no other woman had given him before. And Richard could not resist a challenge. She felt his eyes on her. She did not look away. When he finally spoke, his voice was playful, teasing, the same tone he had used with countless others before. But this time, it was different. Because for the first time, Richard wanted to be the one pursued. From that moment, the space between them grew smaller. Lily no longer waited in the background. She became a presence in his world. The girl who once scrubbed his floors now sat across from him at dinner, accepting the wine he poured, laughing at his stories. He began to send her gifts, simple at first, golden bracelets, silk scarves, but soon, they became more. Dresses fit for a queen. Perfumes that lingered even after she left the room. He took her out, showing her the world she had only ever dreamed of. And as Richard showered her with riches, he did not see the truth, Lily had already won. He had fallen, not knowing that he was never meant to be the hunter. And then, one night, the moment arrived. Richard, so sure of his power, so lost in his own desires, invited her into his world completely. And Lily, the girl who had started this journey as a maid, stepped forward, knowing that she had played the game perfectly. The night swallowed them whole, and as the world outside carried on, Lily's plan was complete. Time passed, and Lily's body began to change. A new life was growing inside her, the very thing she had wished for. She had won. She was no longer just a maid. She was carrying the child of a man who had more riches than she had ever imagined. In her mind, her future was now secure. No longer would she scrub floors. No longer would she sleep on a hard mat in the servants' quarters. Her days of hunger and suffering were over. When Richard learned of her pregnancy, he was taken aback. But unlike what she had feared, he did not push her away. Instead, he laughed. He held her close. He promised to take care of her, to make sure their child had everything. He spoke of a future where she would never have to work again. For the first time, he saw her as more than just a woman who had caught his eye. She was now the mother of his child, and in his mind, that meant she belonged to him. But Lily did not want to belong to anyone. She had not done all of this just to be taken care of. She wanted more. She wanted power. She wanted wealth of her own. And so, as Richard dreamed of his future with her, Lily made a plan of her own. She would not wait for him to decide her fate. She would take what she deserved. She would claim half of everything he owned. After all, had she not given him the greatest gift a woman could give? She found a lawyer, one who knew the laws well. She told him what she wanted, to take Richard to court, to demand her share of his wealth. The lawyer listened. He saw the determination in her eyes. He saw the hunger that could not be satisfied with mere promises. And so, the papers were drawn, the case prepared. It was no longer a matter of love. It was war. When Richard received the notice, his laughter faded. His joy turned to anger. The woman he had trusted, the woman he had promised to care for, was now standing against him, demanding what was his. He called her a gold digger, a woman blinded by greed. He cursed the day he had ever noticed her. But Lily did not care. She had come too far to turn back now. Yet, in the midst of the storm, one man remained silent. Mr. James, Richard's assistant, watched from the shadows. He had seen it all before, women who came and went, women who thought they had found a path to riches. But Lily was different. She had been patient. She had been clever. And yet, she had made one terrible mistake. She did not know the truth about the man she was fighting. As she walked past him, confident in her victory, Mr. James spoke at last. His voice was calm, but his words carried a weight that could not be ignored. "You don't know what you're doing, Lily." But she did not stop. She did not listen. She believed she was already standing at the gates of fortune. She had no idea that the ground beneath her feet was about to crumble. The day had come. The courtroom was filled with whispers, eyes watching, waiting for what would happen next. Lily sat tall, dressed in clothes finer than she had ever worn before. She was no longer a maid. She was a woman who had fought for her place, and now, she was ready to take what she believed was hers. She had carried Richard's child. She had given him an heir. And for that, she deserved half of everything he owned. The judge listened as her lawyer spoke. They spoke of duty, of rights, of the life the child would live. They argued that Richard was a man of great worth, that he could afford to give up a mere half of what he had. Lily sat with pride, believing that justice was on her side. She had played her part well. She had won the heart of a rich man. Now, she would win his fortune too. Richard sat across from her. He did not look afraid. He did not argue. He did not defend himself. He only watched, his face calm, as though he was waiting for something. And then, at last, he spoke. His words were few, but they changed everything. "Investigate my wealth." There was silence in the room. The judge agreed. The case was too big to be decided on words alone. If Richard truly had what Lily claimed, the law would see to it that justice was served. And so, the investigation began. Days passed. Papers were searched. Accounts were checked. Every corner of Richard's life was examined. And then, the truth was revealed. A truth so shocking that it left the courtroom frozen in disbelief. Richard owned nothing. The mansion, the cars, the endless money, it was all an illusion. Every piece of gold, every fine suit, every luxury he had ever displayed did not belong to him. They belonged to another. A man far away, a man who had trusted Richard to watch over his riches, to care for his properties while he lived abroad. Richard was no king of wealth. He was a mere servant. A caretaker dressed in borrowed glory. The courtroom erupted. Gasps filled the air. The lawyers, the judge, the spectators, all looked upon Richard with new eyes. And then, they turned to Lily. The woman who had fought so hard, the woman who had risked everything for a fortune that did not exist. She felt the weight of their stares. She felt the shame rise in her chest. Her hands trembled as she reached for something, anything, to hold on to. But there was nothing. The dream she had built had turned to dust. She had not secured her future. She had not found her escape from poverty. She had only traded one kind of emptiness for another. She looked at Richard, but there was no victory in his eyes. Only amusement. A man who had played the game longer than she had. A man who had known all along that he had nothing to lose. Tears filled her eyes. She had thought herself clever. She had thought she had won. But in the end, she had been chasing a shadow. And now, it was too late to turn back. The courtroom fell silent. The truth had been revealed, and now, there was nothing left to fight for. Richard, the man who had once seemed untouchable, stood before the judge, unbothered. He had lost nothing because he had owned nothing to begin with. And Lily, who had dreamed of taking half of his fortune, was left with nothing but regret. The judge looked at her, disappointment clear in his voice. She had not come seeking justice. She had come seeking riches that did not belong to her. And for that, she had gained nothing but shame. The law could not give her what did not exist. The case was dismissed. Richard walked free. Lily sat frozen in her seat, her breath heavy, her heart sinking. She had spent months believing she was securing her future. She had imagined a life of comfort, of wealth, of never having to struggle again. But now, all those dreams had disappeared like smoke in the wind. There was no fortune waiting for her. No grand house. No endless riches. Only the child in her womb and the long road back to the life she had tried to escape. The world outside was no longer bright. The steps that once led her to Richard's mansion now led her away, back to the small, broken home where she had been raised. The streets that once held hope now felt cold beneath her feet. And when she arrived, there was no welcome. No celebration. Only silence. Sarah, the maid who had once been her friend, stood watching. She had warned Lily, but Lily had not listened. Now, she could see the truth in Sarah's eyes. The truth she had refused to hear. Sarah spoke, her words soft but firm. Hard work was the only path to real success. Wealth gained through deceit could never last. Shortcuts always led to ruin. If Lily had built something of her own, she would not be standing here, empty-handed. Lily lowered her head. She had thought she was being smart. She had believed she was playing the game well. But in the end, she had only been chasing an illusion. Now, she had no choice but to start again. The lesson was clear. True wealth is not stolen. It is earned. And those who seek to take what is not theirs will always find themselves left with nothing. The road to success is long, but it is the only road worth walking. Don't forget to like, subscribe and comment. See you in the next story.